Welcome to Tell Me Your Story with Chris Baker Jr.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching and listening to the podcast, Tell Me Your Story. Today, we got a special guest to come on, and his name is Kerry Castillo. Is that right?
Castillo. Yes, sir.
Castillo. Okay. And we're going to just jump into this like how we always do. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And let's
yeah. Thank you for creating this space. I really appreciate that and for having me on.
No problem, man. No problem. Let's jump right into it.
Okay.
Where does your life begin for you, Kerry?
Wow, my life, man. In relation to what I've shared with you already, as far as if I were to give my story a title per se, I told you that it would be broken, not beaten, right? And so for me, I have to start back when I was a kid. I grew up in a broken home. And I remember, Chris, vividly in prayer one day in church, asking God to just allow me to live long enough to be able to be a husband and a father. And so I think that's where the whole idea of being broken but not beaten really, for me, is really the origin, is what was happening in my life at that time that created in me a desire and a motivation to pray that prayer, because everything else that happened to me after that was only because of that origin, only because of that desire that was in my heart. I went ahead and graduated high school, grew up, and my parents had divorced. And so a lot of things from that, both good and bad, that happened to drive me in some certain directions that I ended up going, to create in me a faith, that I have to point to my mom, who just turned 90 years old, by the way. So prayers up for that. She's still so wise. I love speaking to her. I spoke to her yesterday, and so many things from my parents that really contributed to where I was going in the path that I was on, for good or bad, but I'm thankful for it all. And, I have to pause there for a second and say that anything that happened with my parents and our relationship as a kid have totally healed. And I'll share some of that in a second. But I went to college, and I have to be honest with you, Chris, I grew up in Arkansas, and small town, and just really knew everyone. So I had been introduced to racism, but not on a big scale. But once I got into college and just got into a bigger environment, then for me, racism took on a whole new idea, because I became, I don't want to use the word victim, because I hate to use the word victim or trauma. I'd rather use the word lesson. I learned a lot of lessons from it, and so seeing that and being subjected to that, it inspired me to leave the environment I was in. And so I transferred schools, and this is where my life now, the trajectory really became apparent for me in hindsight. And so
Let me stop you there
yeah,
for a minute.
go ahead.
So when you were dealing with racism, I know there's somebody listening right now, especially dealing with the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle it? And what was like the worst thing that you heard?
So, wow, that's a great question. So, I'd never really been called a lot of racial slurs, but I was playing college football, and the coaches and some of the players were calling me things like wetback and taco and tortilla and things like this. And, I was like, why? What is the point of that? I don't get that. And I had some teammates on the team that were of other minorities, and they were telling me, hey, you can't let them call you these things. And I was like, well, yeah, but if I retaliate, I'm no better. That makes
Yeah.
me no better than them. So it's not going to affect how I see myself, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just had to, man, I really was not seeking God's face at this time. And this would have been a perfect time to be rooted in my identity and who He is. But thankfully, I was very rooted in who I was as a person and what I believed in, and could just forgive and get past it and do what I was there to do, regardless of what else was going on. Yeah.
And in that moment, though, I'm thinking to myself, because you said that prayer.
Yeah.
You said you wanted to be a loving husband. I
Mhm.
think in this moment, God was actually, like, you didn't know it yet, but He was working in you in that moment. He was just preparing you for what was to come.
1,000%. 1,000%. And I think it opened my eyes to how empathetic I was to other people and how caring I was to other people and accepting, forgiving. And so, those are lessons as you become a father. Those are lessons that we have to pass on to our children and find ways to facilitate how to teach that to them, how to show empathy and forgiveness and acceptance and tolerance and all of these things, right, that make us a good person. And so you're 1,000% right. If I don't experience that and don't take the lesson from it, then I can't be the dad that I need to be for my children.
Nope.
Now,
You were leading by example. And like you said, the other guys that were your teammates were saying, like, you need to speak up, you need to say something about this. You can't just allow that.
mhm.
But you were setting the mark. You're like, no, I'm gonna be higher than them. I'm
Yes.
not gonna allow that to bother me. It kind of reminds me of Jackie Robinson, his story, where he
Mm,
was on that baseball team. Everybody was, attacking him with a bunch of slurs and going off on him, and he wanted to go off on them.
right.
But thankfully his coach was telling him, like, "Hey man, don't don't do it,
Yeah.
don't do it. This you're setting an example, and you're like that's pretty much the same thing. Like you're doing exactly the same thing at that time."
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was, I would say, one of the motivating factors that led me to want to leave. But in my search for people, people that accepted me, that uh, not just accepted me, but wanted me to be a part of what they were a part of. And I found a different school and a totally different sport. I actually started playing rugby at a totally different school on the other side of my state. And immediately I knew I'd found my people because they sought me out. They came to me, one of them, one of my teammates, his name was Matt Huckabee. I love this guy still. His father was one of the most influential men in my life ever, ever. And he came to me one day and said, "Hey, have you ever tried to play rugby?" And I was like, "And I've only seen that on TV, And he said, "Well, you should try it." And I stepped into the team, and what I found was such a diverse group of men, just Spanish, Argentine, Brazilian, French, just from all over the world. And they treated me no different, you know, and everyone else on the team, we treated each other so well. And so I knew I'd found a brotherhood, right? That not just accepted me, but loved me for exactly who I was. And um, like I said, I met my coach, my college rugby coach, and that man showed me, he showed me a great example of, of not just mental toughness, but a fortitude in life of how to go through hard things and remain who you are, like rooted in who you are, like really hard things. He developed some diseases and um, later would develop ALS, and sadly, we lost him. And this is after I graduated. But while I was at this new school, Arkansas State University, I met my wife, who would be my wife, and we married super young. So, and she, hung around with me with all the rugby guys, and so we really created a family of all these diverse people, and so I am so thankful for that. That showed me really, when you do get past the facade of what we want people to think, right, and what we want people to think that we do or who we are, it can actually show people who we are at heart, how we can really create connection and community. And so without that experience, I know that I'm not the dad and the coach and the husband that I can be right now. So, but
And
I,
I'm thinking to myself as sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you're perfect.
I'm thinking to myself as you were saying that, like, you transferred, and a lot of people, when they do that, some people are nervous to do that. They think that's gonna, like, what if it doesn't work out? What if
Right.
it, doesn't go the way I want it to?
Mhm.
But in your case, it did. And sometimes that's what's got to be done. You got to do that. Get out of your comfort zone. Do what you have to do. Because in the end, it worked out for you. You found family at this
Mhm.
other school. And
Mhm.
not only that, but then you started playing a whole nother sport.
Yeah. I have you ever read the book by Steve Magnus, Do Hard Things?
Uh,
Boy, it's a
I've
good.
heard of it, though. I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's great. But so much happens to us when we do choose to do hard things. It's so difficult at the time, and I would be remiss if I sat here and tried to make that transfer sound easy. It was not. I struggled. I really struggled with it mentally and emotionally because I did not want to quit. I did not want to even give the appearance of quitting. But I walked into the dean's office about 2 weeks after school had started, and I said, "Listen, I know I've messed up and came to school late because I didn't know if I wanted to be here in the first place. And I'm not asking you for any grace except for one thing. Can you just do me one thing and I'll be out of here? If you'll just backdate my transfer by 2 days because the deadline had passed. That's it. So all you got to do is backdate my transfer by 2 days. I'll be off campus before midnight and I'll be out of here. But I've got to start a new life somewhere. And that's all I'm asking you to do." And he did. He was so gracious and he wished me well. And so, that it caused a lot of doubt. Like, am I really quitting? Am I really giving up on what I want to do? But sometimes leaps of faith feel like that, and I think the problem is that we don't trust who's creating the path in the first place. We think that
Amen.
because we think that it's up to us, so we feel this generic, manufactured shame that we shouldn't feel. Failure is fine. That's the only way we learn. And so I had to fall flat on my face. I had to be broken. What I dreamed of doing, I had to break it and then put it back together somewhere else and with the new people, places, environment around me. And, I love to point in my story to the art of kintsugi. You familiar with that? The Japanese art of taking broken vessels and fixing them with gold, because that's what we are, brother. We're just vessels, and we put ourselves back together, and the scars that we have, though, they tell a story and they provide us a way like this to tell others, hey, this is what happened to me. But ultimately we are just vessels, and God, I know he was just creating me to be the vessel that he needed me to be, and it took a lot of breaking. So I went to Arkansas State, and like I said, I met the love of my life at the time. Her name was Jennifer, and so we married super early, man. I was like 22, she was 21. And I know my parents were, yeah, I know our parents were thinking, wow, these two are crazy. But we were crazy about each other, and not just, like a fly by night kind of falling in love. I mean, we did a lot growing up together. And we both graduated college, and then we took jobs in her hometown and moved back to her hometown. And you know, when life is going really good, I hope people take this away. When life is going really good, I won't say that, we should be wary of the bottom falling out, quote unquote, but it's always good to be prepared. And let me tell you, at the time, I was not. Um, the big C word showed up. And so her mom developed a very rare form of cancer. And in her process of dealing with that and doing chemo and all of those things and that pathway of what that looks like, we got pregnant. And so her mom, still in remediation at the time, not remediation. What's the word I'm looking for? Remission.
Radiation.
In remission at the time. Sorry, I'm a school teacher. Remediation is just there. At the time, was with us, thankfully, in the room having the ultrasound, and the doctor said, "Okay, there's the first one," and I was like, "The first one? Are we still talking about babies? What?" And she said, "Right." And then she showed me, "Okay, there's baby B," and we were like, "What?" And so, yeah, her mom is jumping up and down, and Jennifer and I are both staring at each other like, "How do we
Excuse
afford
me.
babies?"
What's
And
going
so,
on?
and so we found that we were going to have twins. And, in the middle of all this joy, there's still in the back of our mind, how long does remission last? Is this a forever thing? And so, sadly, throughout Jennifer's pregnancy, her mom's cancer did return. And the day that Jennifer had a C-section to have our girls born, her mom was actually having a surgery and wasn't able to be there to remove some tumors. But in that process, what they discovered was it was way worse than they thought. And so now the joy of bringing these two beautiful girls into the world, it's almost stolen in a way, because now we're getting the news that the time we thought we had with her mom is actually less, right? And so we had to go home with that, not just two kids, but with fear. Um, and so she took care of her mom a lot while also trying to raise two girls, two babies. And I didn't realize, but my wife had battled depression as a young person throughout high school and college, but it wasn't something that consumed her. It was simply manifesting itself at times in a little apathy, if life was kind of tough. But we managed and we got through those kinds of things together. But in this case, what I didn't see, that I now sadly see with hindsight, was that while we were losing her mom, I was also losing her,
Yeah.
because her will to fight was withering. And after we lost her mom, um, she went into a very deep state of depression. And so much so that I became our girl's primary caregiver. Um, and we hardly saw her. She slept a lot and thought to just get away from the world when she could, you know. And even remember trying to reason with her one night, like, "Hey, you've got to make a choice to get back into life with us. We are here. We're not going anywhere. I'll support you, but you have to be the one to make the choice to fight." And a couple weeks later, uh, we had taken new jobs, and a couple weeks later, she decided, "Hey, let's throw a party, a going away party," because we were moving. And she was so just vivacious. She was her old self. I mean, the girl that I fell in love with in college. And I thought, "Hey, here we are. Here we go. Now we're fighting." Right. And so we threw this big party and had family and friends. It was great. It was fantastic. We took so many pictures. And I thought we were like headed in a trajectory where we're going to walk out of this phase of our life and we're going to raise our family. We're going to start over. And so we moved into a new city, new apartment. And uh, we had only been in our apartment a couple of years, or a couple of weeks rather. And I went for a jog one day. But before I did, I stopped by the couch where Jennifer was sitting. And I think I just walked in from work. And she was just sitting on the couch in the quiet, in the dark. And it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so, and the girls were in their cribs asleep in their bedroom. The door was shut. And I had the final conversation I'd had with my wife, but I just didn't know it. And I sat down in front of her, and she said, are you going to go for a run? Because I'd mentioned that to her early in the day. I said, yes, I think I will. And, okay, well, when you get home, let's load the girls up and go have ice cream and just go for a drive, and we'll just spend some time together. And I thought, wow, this is what I've been praying for, right? It's for you to fight. And I kissed her on the forehead, and I got up to walk out, and she said, I love you. And I just said, love you too. So dismissive, So here's why I say that in the manner that I say that. Because if you're listening and you have a loved one who struggles with depression, and even if you don't, if you just whomever you deeply love in your life, every moment with them matters. Please don't be dismissive of any second that you get with them. Every second we get with the people we love is an absolute gift. I mean, it is a hand-wrapped gift from God Almighty. And so I know that now, but it's because of the lesson I took away from this. And so I went for my run, and Chris, stop me whenever you have a question, man.
I'm thinking to you probably saw it, being a teacher, you're like, he's got something to say.
And so
I'm thinking to myself as you were saying that, like, that is so right. Mm-hmm. Like, my parents taught me that growing up. Yeah. And then I've been kind of teaching my wife now that I'm married that we have to appreciate every moment.
Absolutely.
Because you just never know. And that, as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, that hits home, because for me, I always, regardless whoever it is, I always make sure that final conversation I have with you is special.
Right.
I always say I love you. If you need anything, I'm here. Because, like you said, you just never know. And at that time, we always think, like, okay, it's just, life goes on. I'm just going to go do my normal routine. You're going out for a run. And you don't realize that's it. That's the final seconds.
That was it. I'd never hear her voice again. And so I went for my run. I was maybe gone 30 minutes. And I happened to pass a police officer on my way who was, I found out later, he had just come on shift and was having some dinner parked in a parking lot. And I walked back into our apartment, and it was really quiet. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe she laid down for a nap too, since the girls were asleep. And so I tiptoed through the apartment, and our bedroom door was open, and I just peeked in, and she was laying on the bed. And so I just kind of dismissed it in the second that it took me to peek in and see her lying there. But as soon as I turned my attention away from the room, everything in me stopped me just in my tracks and told me that something is very wrong. And so I went back into the room, and this part, honestly, is like slow motion. I know it was just a couple of seconds or minutes, but I went into her and saw everything and wondered how in the world did this happen. Like, I'm looking on the walls to see if something might have fallen off the wall and hit her in the head. And I'm searching around, I'm checking her pulse, and it was very faint. And I looked down, and in her hand was the very pistol I had bought her to protect our family when I'm gone at away games, because I coach, and so I'm gone a lot of nights. And so the very thing I'd given her as a gift to protect her and our daughters. And so I realized then what had happened, and ran back to my phone, dialed 911, and the time it took me to get from my phone back to her, the police officer I'd just passed was coming into the apartment. And that's when I found the note she had left me, explaining why and how sorry she was. And so I wasn't able to absorb all of that right then, right? I went back to it later and have kept it. I still have it. But I set it down and stepped away so that he could do his job. And that's when it dawned on me. I have not heard my children. And if I wasn't already full of fear, I was gripped by it then. Because I thought in that moment that she had maybe taken them with her. And their bedroom door was still shut. And so I've heard stories of people in moments of extreme duress not remembering moving, but feeling as if they were carried. And for me, this is what that moment was. I couldn't move. I could feel myself being carried to that door and filled with the courage to open it. And thankfully, I found my daughters in their cribs, and they had such a look of bewilderment on their face. And I later thought about this, like, what in the world did they hear? What were their final moments with her? And what things did they hear going on? And what really makes that resonate with me is that when they were just infants, and even into their 5 and 6-year-old stages of life, they would react very alarmingly to loud noises. I mean, it would make one of my girls would just go completely catatonic. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, and later they would both. We sought out some therapists for them because they certainly had some PTSD. So we had to deal with that later. But at the moment, they were just in shock, the look on their face. And so I immediately dropped to the floor and was pulling the carpet away from the flooring underneath, just half in agony and half in gratitude that they were still there,
Mm-hmm.
And as the apartment filled with EMTs and more police officers, we began the process of trying to contact her father and sisters and my family, my parents, and I had a friend come and pick up my daughters and take them, who later came back to get me. And by the end of the day, I had ended up back in our old house that we had just moved from, sitting at the dining room table. It was like the only thing left in the house that we hadn't moved yet, with my parents and stepparents. And my mom asked me the most important question that anyone has ever asked me. She looked at me. This is after I put my daughters to bed, trying to get this day over with. And she looked at me and said, "Son, what are you going to do?" What a question, Chris.
Yeah. In that moment, especially,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking to myself, like, you always see the movies, you always hear about, you have to be, especially as a man, you have to be strong. You're the head of your house, and you're thinking everything's sunshine and rainbows, and you know in the back of your mind, especially after this happens, do you feel like a failure. You feel like you just weren't, you didn't do enough.
Yep.
Like, what could I have done to prevent this?
Mm-hmm.
I could only imagine the stuff that was running through your mind. You're glad at the same time that the babies are okay,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time you just lost the love of your life,
Mm-hmm.
and you're feeling like a complete failure. And then your mom asks you, "What are you gonna do about it?" So go ahead. What did you do about it?
Well, that would be, had God not been shaping me the way He had been, that would have been, it would have been so easy to wallow in shame. I failed my wife. I failed her. I failed my daughters. I failed them. I knew that. I knew that. And it would be so easy to be eaten up by my shame and just cry or fall on my face or give up or try to numb the pain. But my college rugby coach, he had this 4-word saying for us. And sometimes it was when we were in trouble, and other times it was a philosophical question, really a command. Get on the line. And in that moment, those are the 4 words that leapt into my heart and mind. I got to get on the line, whatever that line is now. And I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to raise my daughters by myself. And I'm going to be the best dad that they could ever imagine, because that's what they deserve. And so I did. And so I did. I had a lot of help from people that God picked up and put into my life, that I don't have a lot of contact with now, but I'm so thankful for. And a lot of people helped me take care of my daughters throughout the day while I was at work or games. Uh, but then there were those moments when everyone is gone and it's me and them, bath time, and it's book time and bedtime, and I'm doing that alone. And once they're in bed, now where do my thoughts go? And I would be not telling the truth if I told you the thought of following her did not cross my mind. But I know that the resiliency I'd been building in my life was in me then, and that God had given me my daughters not to hear my prayer that I prayed as a young kid, but also as the motivation to be even stronger. And so again, I reached out to God in prayer, but this time it sounded more like a bargaining. Who am I to bargain with God? But there I was, laying in the floor on my face, bargaining with God. And I said, okay, God, my plan wasn't good enough for you, and you allowed this to happen. So I'm done with you. I'm going to ask you one last thing, and you owe me this. You owe me this. Send me someone that loves my daughters twice as much as they love me. I don't even need to be loved. I'm tough enough for this. I can make it. But my daughters don't deserve it. And I didn't pray for a very long time after that. I would not go to church. But I remember praying that prayer. And what I did instead of prayer, which now, boy, I wish I would have stayed in prayer to couple those things and solidify my faith, is I tried to make myself stronger physically and mentally. So I did a lot of reading and I did a lot of training and running and lifting. And I thought that if I could make myself stronger physically and mentally, then my will to get through this and get on the other side of this would also be strengthened, you know? And so I even bought myself a motorcycle because just riding by myself, and feeling free was very freeing for me emotionally. It was like numbing the pain without having to take something, you know. Um, and praise God, I had a mom that I know was on her knees interceding,
Yeah.
interceding
Yeah.
on my part.
And that's what I was thinking to myself. It's like we try to be the tough guy. We try
Right.
to say, "I don't need you, Lord,"
Mhm.
and you had every right. You had every right to be mad, because you had so much going on.
Yeah.
Especially after losing your wife,
Yeah.
and you're raising your daughters, and you have to take that step. But what I love about God is even when we're being stubborn like that, and even when we're turning our backs, the second we turn back around, He's right there. He never
Absolutely.
leaves. He's
That's
never
right.
leaves. He's always right there, arms open wide,
That's right.
saying, I understand. I
Mhm.
know what you're going through,
Mhm.
and you're not alone.
Yeah.
So when you think that you're carrying all this by yourself, you're not carrying it at all. God is.
That's right. You know, I and I kept telling God, I'm not going to church. I'll send my daughters to church. I'm not going. And I had friends like, hey, you need to get back in church. And my mom, hey, you need to go to church. And yeah, that's not happening. And so a friend reached out to me and asked if I would be a part of a dating auction in which the contributions were going to go to this charitable organization. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'm like, listen, I'm not ready to date, but sure, I'll do this. And so, okay, well, I need to take some pictures, but I need to do them at the same time as this other person. She was totally setting me up. And so Candace, my now wife, and I went and took pictures together with this friend of ours. And I just decided, I think I might ask her out, but I wasn't quite ready yet. And in the middle of us taking pictures, I said, hey, listen, I've got to pick up my daughters. So I can either take you guys home or you can come with me to get my daughters. But I've got to go meet them right now with my stepmom. And they were like, no, we'll tag along. No big deal. Okay. And so I went and picked up my girls and I put them in the back seat and they hadn't eaten yet. And so we were going to go to a drive through and they were so little. They were still just one at the time. And so they couldn't eat like whole food. They had to have it torn up. And so pulled through a drive through, got them some chicken nuggets or something like that. And Candace, this girl I'm wanting to ask out, right, gets out of the front seat, climbs into the floorboard of the back seat, and tears their food up for them and feeds it to them.
Now, in that moment, though,
Mm-hmm.
did it like hit you right away? did you say, okay, God? Were you thinking that, or were you kind of still with that block up? What was
I,
going on?
I absolutely saw it, and I said, "No, nice try."
Nice try. I
Yeah,
see what you're doing, but
yeah,
uh-uh,
yeah,
not
yeah.
yet.
That was my attitude. That was my attitude. Was okay, God. I know that's what I prayed for, but I'm not ready. That's not right now. And we decided not to date. We went on a couple of dates, but we decided not to date because I was not. I just wasn't emotionally ready for that. She knew that, and so did I. And as much as I was trying to be tough, you know, and what she did though was every day show me how much God really loved me because she would help me with my girls. And she lived 45 minutes away, but she would come and take care of them and take them places for me while I was gone at games and things like that. And spend time with me, but just as a friend, just as someone to sit with me when I was not okay. And to show me that there's so much more than just being mad at God. You know, you can have joy again. And when we did finally decide to try to date each other, it was after my daughter's second birthday. I knew at their birthday that emotionally I was ready to try to love her. But it didn't dawn on me until this moment at their birthday, their second birthday. I invited all of our family and sent out all these invitations and dressed them like Tinkerbell. And I sat down at the table where their birthday cake was with one of them each on each leg. And there was an empty chair beside me. And I never felt so alone through this entire process. I'd never felt so alone as I did right then. Even with this room full of people that I know loved them and me, I'd still just never felt so by myself and in trying to do what I said I was going to do and parent them and raise them and love them. And then Candace gets up and comes and sits right next to us. She didn't say a word, but she was right there in the middle of it with me. She could see the countenance on my face. She knew what I was thinking. And she decided to be in the middle of it with me. And I knew then I can love her.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. I don't have to feel guilty about that. I don't have to feel any shame for wanting that or wanting to feel that. And so we decided to date each other. But first, the first place she asked me to go with her, will you go to church with me this weekend? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And I remember walking into her church and sitting down, and the worship choir was praising, and I remember thinking, okay, God, you got me. Here I am. You got me. And I was so thankful, though. I felt like just in my heart, it felt so good, to be there and to relinquish control. And Candace, eventually ended up adopting my daughters, and but before she did. She just showed me in so many ways what a great mom she was. I mean, how brave of her, right? To step into automatic parenthood with two, you know? And
Well, as I'm reflecting on it, I'm thinking to myself, I'm building the story in my mind.
mhm,
I'm thinking like, wow, Kansas, she must be really connected to God,
mm,
because I'm thinking about like exactly what you prayed for, and what she was stepping into your world. And God, God had been coaching her along the way, because everything like how you just said is she played into it, you know, from the very first time she was with your daughters. She broke up the food for them, and then she slowly eased herself into it. And in that moment when it finally dawned on you, because you couldn't run, you couldn't hide anymore from the idea, while you're sitting there at that table, God says you're ready now,
mhm,
and she sat down.
yeah,
And that's exactly what you prayed for that night. And you were avoiding all this time. And God, like, that's what I always say about God, is God never gives up on us. We
mhm,
might give up on Him at times, but He never gives up on us. And
mhm,
in that moment, that's where it happened. God said,
yeah,
"Okay, son, it's time to come back." And
mhm.
that's the first place He asks you to go to, church.
That's right. Yeah. You know, I guess it still hadn't dawned on me that this prayer I'd prayed as a kid, like that was coming to fruition every day more and more until our first Christmas together. We had put the girls down. Santa Claus is coming, and she gave me a Santa hat and some bells, and she said, "Why don't you go into the attic and stomp around a little bit and jingle bells. That way, if the girls are still awake, it'll just create that magic for them, right?" And I remember as I'm doing that, just an overwhelming sense of gratitude. And heard the Holy Spirit just whisper to me, "See, I've been right here. I never left you. I was here the whole time. And I won't ever leave."
It's powerful, man. Just when
And
it, just every time you like you reflect on it, because you go through all that time going through that mode, you're just like really man to man thinking about it. It's like you try to avoid it, you try to say like it's all me, it's all me.
mhm, mhm,
And then when you start reflecting on just looking back at stuff, you're just like, it's never been just me. You've been here all along. I just been trying to ignore you and pretend like that wasn't you and say it was me and take the credit for it, but really
right,
it was you.
right.
Because there's no way I could have
I
done
was
it without you.
right. Mhm. Yeah. You know, I, I have to be I have to be grateful now for all of that experience. I hate the word trauma, and I know for some people there are traumatic things that happen to them, but for me, I don't see this as trauma. I see it as me being shaped, and because we wanted to have a big family, we got married, and we wanted to have a lot of kids, and that just wasn't the plan, And so when we did finally get pregnant, um, we told everybody, and we took all these pictures, and a couple of months, just like overjoyed. Uh, and sadly, we lost a child, we lost a baby, and I know that I couldn't have counseled my wife the way that I was able to unless I walked through the grief that I walked through. And I found a book one day. I was thinking to myself, the same way that I strengthened myself, I have to strengthen our marriage, because we began to drift, just full of grief, and I had to strengthen our marriage. And I found a book that her church required us to go to a counseling session before we married in that church. We were given this book. It's called A Couple After God's Own Heart. And in it are these stories of biblical women and their husbands who lost children and weren't able to have children until they fully leaned on God's promises for them. And so we started this devotional together every single day. And our marriage began to flourish. We decided to try to get pregnant again. And it took us almost 3 years. Lots of doctor visits, lots of infertility clinics and things like that. And she finally looked at me one day, I think it was in the evening, and said, I'm tired of all the medicine. I'm tired of all of the doctor visits. I'm tired of depending on anything other than what God wants for us. If He wants us to have a child, we're going to have a child. And if He doesn't, then we won't. And a few months went by after we had that discussion, and you have to keep thinking, is this the month, that we get pregnant? And I was at soccer practice one afternoon, and I get a phone call from her. I was like, hope everything's okay. I answer, and she said, hey, you need to hurry home, because I just got back from Walgreens with a pregnancy test, and I think you're going to be happy. And so 9 months later, we welcomed our little boy. His name is Josh. Yeah. And we named him. We gave him the first name of Declan. It was behind me on the wall. He's a man of prayer. And so praise God. Again, when we couldn't do it, we leaned on Him to do it. And He did.
And He came through.
Yep.
Well, at least you weren't 99 years old.
Man, my niece at 48. I can't imagine raising one at 99.
Could you imagine that news? I still just thinking about that stuff when people are trying to have babies and stuff.
Yeah.
I go back to that story and could you imagine your wife overhearing that, laugh about it, one being that age? Mm-hmm. I'd be like, what? Right. We're not even doing that stuff anymore. Let alone you're gonna say I'll be pregnant next year. Yeah, right. So I agree with her. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, not 99, but you're there. You got your baby boy.
Yeah.
And then, I could imagine during that time period though, there was a lot of praying. Oh yeah. Were you guys doubtful at times though? Especially going 3 years in the running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. There were a lot of days where we started to have the conversation of, okay, if we don't get pregnant, do we want to adopt or foster, something of that nature? And so, sure, of course we did. Yeah, we did. And again, I think that's part of the process of being broken, though, is when you are broken, the old doubts that you had are broken as well, And so then we were so silly, we conjure up these new things to doubt, right? When again, you got to go back to whom is in control. It's not us. How in the world can we doubt? And so we just kept hanging on. We did. We just kept hanging on, and we asked people to pray about it. Our Sunday school class and our parents, and we just asking all these people, "Hey, be in prayer. We're going to try and have a baby, and we're believing it." And so when we did find out, then we did the same thing. We told the people straight away, and in the back of your mind, there's the thought that, well, what if we lose this one too? But not this time. Not this time. This time we were believing on it, and that's something that I helped her set up this um, yellow tape on the crib, or not crib, the nursery room door that said caution, instruction, because we were going to build our son's nursery. And it's like, we're going to take these pictures. What if something bad happens? Like, no, we're believing. We're believing on this. This is where our son is going to sleep, our daughter. And so, and I just had a feeling all along that we were going to have a boy. But
fire was alive, man.
That's right. That's right. Those things, I love that we can, as we're broken, take these new evidences of strength and of God's goodness with us, into just the next thing, because there's always going to be a next thing, whatever it is, and that we don't have to be afraid in that. And I know that's easier said than done, because it's natural to have some sort of fear. But COVID came around, and it, again, just like with my first wife, and how everything was going great, and then cancer, But this time, it was COVID. And in 2021, I believe it was, really when the whole pandemic was in full swing. Everyone's at home and doing meets remotely and working remotely, and no school and things like that. Well, we finally went back to school, and that's when I got it. I got COVID, and actually everyone in the house got it except my son. And
Wow.
so here I am. I've got COVID, and I went a couple of weeks. With it, thinking it'll get better in a few days. And it got harder and harder to breathe, and my fever wouldn't go away, and I was really beginning to struggle. And so I looked at my wife and I said, "Candace, I think I need to go see a doctor." And so I went to like a Med Express or something like that, and they did an X-ray of my lungs, and when they came back in, they brought me a DVD and my file on the middle folder. And they said, "You need to take these things to the nearest emergency room." I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, tell me what's the sense of urgency here? And they said, "Your lungs are filling up with fluid. You have pneumonia, and it's really bad. If we were you, we'd go to the hospital right now." And so, well, okay. So I called my wife. I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to the emergency room. Here's what they told me. I'll call you when I know more." And so I drove myself to the emergency room. When I got to the emergency room and they got those files and everything and looked at them, they immediately got me into a room. And sadly, it was on the weekend. There was only one doctor on call, so I had to wait 24 hours for a Tylenol. But I was on a COVID wing. And so the only patients on that floor were COVID patients. It was me and maybe two other people at the time. And the next day, after I was admitted, I told my wife, "Hey, they're admitting me. I don't know how long this is going to be." So she's freaking out, but she's also dealing with COVID, and my daughters have COVID. And so I'm in the hospital, and the doctor comes in, as well as a pulmonologist. And they had been looking at all of the diagnostics, and I said, you're very sick. We're considering putting you on a ventilator. And I said, you're not putting me on one of those. I'm not doing that, you know. And so he said, well, you're very sick. We may not have a choice. You're going to be here for a few days. If we've got to have you on one of these things soon. I said, that's not an option, but since you're telling me this is pretty severe, I'm a coach. Give me some numbers. What are the statistics we're talking about here? And he said, we're going to give you less than a 40% chance of living. And I was like, what? Like, hit me with a sledgehammer, right? And so they showed me the x-rays, and they were like, you've got maybe 30% lung function at best. We're going to put you on oxygen right now as much as we can. And I said, well, is there anything else you can do? Can you give me antibodies? And they were like, well, it's kind of out of the time window to do that. And well, is it going to kill me? And he said, no. So, okay, then let's go. Hit me with that, And so I told them, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Give me 3 days. You can come in here every hour and give me as much steroids and antibiotics as you can give me. And in 3 days, if I'm not any better or if I'm worse, then we'll do something different. He said, okay, it's your funeral kind of deal. And so as they walked out of the room, and I couldn't tell my wife this news. There's no way I could share this with her. And so I remember reaching up with both hands. I was laying on my back, and I reached up toward the ceiling. I said, God, the only way I'm getting out of here is if you take me out of here. I pleaded with God. The same way I'd asked to be a husband and father, I pleaded for my life, for my family's sake, So God, if you'll deliver me from this, also give me a platform to talk about your goodness. And here we are talking to each other.
There we are.
Here we are. And 13 days later, I got released, and it was on my daughter's birthday. And so I got wheeled out. I didn't walk out, but I did get wheeled out. And they had given me a breathing machine. I had to breathe into it. And they told me after about 9 or 10 days, when you can get this little air bubble inside this thing to this certain level and keep it there for 30 seconds, then we'll think about letting you go home. Man, let me tell you, I was breathing in that thing every 5 minutes. Fighting. That was how I was going to strengthen myself. The same way I strengthened myself, physically and mentally, emotionally. This is how I was strengthening myself now. And so God is so good. God is just so good. He carried me through all these things, just building me every step of the way, breaking me who I was to make me into the vessel that he wants me to be. Yeah. So I'm just so thankful.
All right, as I begin to wrap this thing up, Kerry, I just want to say thank you, man. That truly is an incredible story. Truly incredible.
Well, Chris, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful that you've created the space, as I mentioned earlier, but I'm thankful for your obedience as well, and that you take these messages and these testimonies and stories, whether they're based on God's goodness or not. You're doing great work, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's why I created this platform, because I just know people need to hear these stories. Mm-hmm. People, somebody's dealing exactly what you're dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And honestly, since we're right there on this topic, somebody right now is listening, watching, and they're going through it. They just found out that the most devastating thing happened. they lost their wife, and they're taking the blame for everything. What do you tell that person right now?
I'm so glad you asked that, because after all of these things have happened, here's what I've noticed, Chris, is that if we're obedient with love and faithful with it, then we'll be given more to be faithful and obedient with. And what I've found is that as I experience other people, God has made me very sensitive to them and to things, emotions that they're feeling. Let me give you an example. And this, I promise, this is the delivery of the answer of your question. We were having dinner one night, and our waiter, we were on vacation, it was over Christmas, and our waiter came to the table and he handed us our food, and I noticed on his wrist a semicolon tattoo. And this, I was locked into my chair. I could not move. This had happened to me several times before, so when Candace sees this, she knows what is going on. And she asked me, "Who is it? And do you need me and the kids to get up?" I said, "No, I actually want you all here, but it's our waiter." And I told her about his tattoo. When he came back, I grabbed him by that tattoo, by his wrist. And I said, "Hey, God is not done with you yet. There is more for you to do, and He has a plan. The world is a better place with you in it." And he began to weep. He began to weep at our table. And he told me, "I gave up on God. I haven't been to church in over 10 years. I tried to kill myself. I still want to. But my mom called me this week. She lives in South America. And she told me, come home and go to church with me. Tomorrow, I'm getting on a plane to go to her so we can go to church together." And so whatever anyone is going through in any way, shape, form, or context, God is not done with you. He has a plan. It is perfect. The timeline of that plan is inconsequential. How much time we have is inconsequential. As long as we're here, He has a plan. It is perfect. There's more for you to do. We have to make the choice to step into that plan, to accept it, to submit to His will and to what He has for us. And that's what becomes difficult, is sitting in the comfort of the agony and grief that we get used to feeling, or trying to step out of it into the unknown and what we don't know is going to happen, what we don't know we're going to feel, experience, or be asked of in His plan. But it is good. It's perfect. He's not done with us.
And with that, I wrap it up with this. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Tell Me Your Story podcast. Real stories, real lives, real people. Until next time.